Welcome everyone to this new episode of the Privacy Rules Privacy Espresso series, a series where we delve into the latest news from all over the world on privacy, data protection, and cybersecurity, together with the experts of the Privacy Rules Alliance from all over. Today with me, I have Luiza Sato from the law firm TozziniFreire Advogados in Brazil, in order to discuss about a very recent news coming from there. So first of all, Luiza, thanks a lot for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Alessandro. Happy to be here.
As you might know, Luiza is one of the partners of the firm and one of the leaders of their privacy and data protection team. So, of course, we are going to speak about data protection related news. And this is a very recent one, because on the 26th of April, the Brazilian Data Protection Authority has published a final guideline on security incident reporting regulation, which is a very sensitive topic and is something that is very important, of course, for any privacy related activity. So this document is giving, as we say, guideline in order to provide indication on how to communicate a security incident, not just to the authority, but also to the data subject. That was my understanding. So, Lisa, my first question to you would be, which are the real news of this law? Meaning, of course, we know that in Brazil we have the LGPD for data protection, but what are the answers that we're missing from this piece of regulation that now we have thanks to these documents?
Yeah. So, Alessandro, just to start, under the LGPD, we had no definition of data breach or information security incident whatsoever. Now we do. I'm going to need my notes for that, so I'm going to share my screen over here. So the definition is this one right here. So the data breach is considered now an adverse event that compromises the confidentiality, integrity, availability, and authenticity of the security of personal data, which may result from voluntary or accidental actions that result in disclosure, dissemination, alteration, and undue loss, or unauthorized access to personal data, regardless of the medium in which they are stored. So now we do have a definition of data breach, and then we can see here that we are talking only about personal data because this regulation refers to personal data. So incidents involving this type of data, which are the incidents that should be notified to the ANPD, which is our data protection authority, and the data subjects. So we now have this definition, but also very important, the regulation also brought us details on what events should be notified to both the DPA and the data subjects. Before that, the LGPD only said that we should notify incidents that could cause high risk or damage to the data subject, but we didn't know when we could classify an incident under that characteristics. So now we do know that this incident should be notified should first significantly affect the data subject's interest and fundamental rights because it prevents the exercise of rights or the use of a service, or because it causes material or moral damage to the data subjects. And so plus, it involves at least one of the following categories of data: sensitive personal data, data relating to children, adolescents, or the elderly, financial data, system authentication data protected by legal, judicial, or professional secrecy, or large-scale process data. So now we know that we have to have those two conditions for a data breach to be notified, and then you should notify to both the DPA and the data subjects whenever you see that the incident had those two characteristics. And also, finally, very important, this is one of the answers that we were really looking for, is when should an event be notified to both the DPA and the data subjects? Under the LGPD, all we had was you have to do this under a reasonable time frame. But let's be reasonable. What is reasonable? No one knew. So what is reasonable to you may not be the same for me. So we had no conclusions on that. But now we know that reasonable is 3 business days after the controller becomes aware that the incident has impacted personal data. Of course, this is in all those cases where we don't have legislation stating otherwise, specifically, for instance, banking legislation, because they bring a different deadline for that. So those were the main 3 answers that we have.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for sharing, and thanks a lot for the slide. That definitely helps in keeping these in mind, which is essential. I see that The good thing is that it's now definitely clear, how to move when there is an incident and which are the duties. Of course, the other face of the coin is that this means compliance, mean that now companies has something to comply with, so there is less, let's say, flexibility, but definitely more clarity, which is a great thing, of course, if you want to be compliant and move in the right direction. In this regard, is there any other matter that this piece of document was bringing in that you think should be, our listeners should be aware of?
Sure. So this regulation is a very large one, so it has a lot of content. But I think I would say that we have other 4 very important matters that were brought by the new regulation. First one would be the minimum content of the notifications that should be sent to the authority and the data subjects. They are similar, but they have differences. 2, the description of the procedures to be adopted by the DPA from start to finish after it receives the notification from the controller. 3, the measures that the DPA can request the controller to take to mitigate the effects of the data breach. And also, finally, the obligation of the controller to keep for at least 5 years the records of the security incidents, including those that were not reported. So if the controller thinks that it didn't, had those 2 characteristics should be reported, either way, it should maintain records, because if someone asks about this incident later in the future, the controller will have the records of the event.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. And I would stress in particular the first point, because again, we are having 3 days to notify an incident. That is not such a big time frame. So having clear in mind which are the key or minimum content that might need to be notified is essential. So might be something to look at already in your, let's say, preparatory plan if something wrong happens, I believe, but I'll leave these to you. And in this regard, probably this brings me to my next question. I mean, on the practical side, what does it mean? What's next? So what should controller do now that there is this new regulation?
Good, right. So when facing data breaches from now on, follow this regulation, because the ANPD, the DPA, will check every line of that. But also at this point, if you have no data breaches now to take care of, I would suggest controllers to both review their internal policies, because a lot has changed. We have lots of details that should be included in these policies, and also all the time that you change the policies, please do a training with your staff, because you tell them, well, we have a new policy here, please accept it, read it and accept it. But sometimes they just don't read and accept whatever they are telling them to accept. So a training should take place so people actually know what steps to take when a data breach occurs, because, Alessandro, they will occur.
They will, of course, and as let me echo you in what you are saying in terms of preparing plan and making sure that the people within your company are aware of which is the plan, and everyone knows what to do if something happens or how to avoid something to happen. And of course, there are lawyers and experts as you are that can support companies in making these easy and in the proper way. So definitely looking forward to having you supporting many of our listeners, hopefully. And thanks a lot, Luiza, because we are running out of our time, but this was very quick and clear. So thanks for the updates. Thanks for your time. And I really look forward to meeting you in our next Privacy Espresso.
Me too. Thank you, Alessandro.